So tell me the story from the beginning. What happened? To kind of tell it the way you wrote it, if you want, about your father and leprosy.
Well, I wrote the article concerning communion today. A lot of people feel that when you receive communion with the same spoon, it's really not sanitary. And what about the priest when he has to consume all the communion, the leftover, called catalysis at the end of the services of the communion? Now, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, in the late 30s, 1930s, so my father was at the time the priest of the leper colony in Chios, called Leper. There they had at the time, about 25 inmates with leprosy, away from society, so to speak. But there was a church there, St. Lazarus, and my father was assigned to that church, and he would serve the inmates as well as people from the neighborhood that had no other church in their vicinity. They would come to that church and to receive communion. Every one of us, myself, my family, the neighbors, they all received communion with the inmates, of course. Yeah, the inmates were part of the congregation. Not all of them, but
the patients. The patients, you mean, the patients.
Well, they were inmates because they were not allowed to get out. So at the end of the communion, of course, my father had to consume the catalysis of the leftover communion. Okay. The resident the resident doctor was an atheist, and he looked at all this going on, and he didn't believe that my father would consume the leftover communion at the end of the services. So he used to even spread the rumors to the rest of us that he really doesn't consume the leftover communion, but he spills it down the sink and cleans out the chalice. Well, to make his point and prove himself correct, one time he waited and hid himself behind a curtain and watched what my father would do. And he saw that my father really consumed the leftover communion. After that day, the atheist doctor became a believer, and to this day, the people that witnessed all these things know this. They even know the name of the doctor. I know his name. I knew him for a little while before he left for Ethiopia. He went to staff of the king of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie. So this story...
Do you remember his name, the doctor?
Paspatis, Dr. Paspatis. Yes, okay. Paspatis. He had a son my age, and with cousin Isidore Halakis, who's a pathologist now, retired pathologist in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The three of us were very, very close friends. We used to play around. So it's a true story, This is not.
And now your dad moved. You got promoted to the tuberculosis.
Okay, so after, when the Nazis came over shortly after the occupation of my island by the Germans, my father was promoted, so to speak, from the leper colony to the general hospital in the city of Chios. Of course, there were many patients. Some of them had tuberculosis, and that's more dangerous as far as communicable.
It's more contagious.
More contagious, right, than leprosy. And he served communion to all those patients, and nothing happens to him. He lived to be 93 in very good health.
And your mom?
I am close to 90, 85, and nothing ever happened to me.
Did you? And you communed with the inmates and the patients
Yes,
at the
okay.
hospital?
By the way, in the leper colony, we used to eat together our meals after on Sundays after the services. We sat together like family. I mean,
Right.
there was no. We never even thought of catching the disease.
Now, the leper colony kept these people isolated because they knew it was contagious.
At the time, yes.
And the same thing with TB, which is very contagious.
Yes.
And you communed with the tuberculosis patients during the same liturgy?
No, no. Some of them came to church if they were well enough. Others were bedridden, so my father would go to them and give them communion.
I
But
see.
those that came to the again the church of the hospital, the chapel, was Saint Stephanus, and there were a lot of people in the neighborhood that used that as their enoria, as their parish. So people that were patients in the hospital, they would mingle with us in the congregation, and he gave the communion, and nobody ever even questioned why these people, do they have tuberculosis or any other diseases that are
So
dangerous?
what message do you think this sends to the churches today?
That there is no reason to even think about getting a disease through communion. It's a ridiculous. It's a ridiculous idea. It's a ridiculous idea.